Congresswoman Omar, I propose to present you with a query of the utmost simplicity. In the event of a hypothetical armed conflict between the United States and Somalia, to which sovereign nation would you desire victory? Speaker Mike Johnson's vocal delivery sliced through the dense atmosphere of the House Ethics Committee chamber with the sharpness of a surgical instrument. It was composed, deliberate, and entirely detached, resonating with the tone of a constitutional scholar who had dedicated half a year to constructing an unassailable legal argument and possessed absolute clarity regarding his next maneuver. A profound, quiet descended, a complete and stifling stillness that enveloped the room. Representative Ilhan Omar remained seated at the witness table, her legal counsel positioned at her side, with stacks of folders arranged before them. She had been responding to inquiries for a duration of 6 hours, engaging in deflection, offering explanations, and maintaining a defensive posture. However, this particular inquiry was fundamentally distinct in its nature. This was a question for which there exists no favorable response. Every individual present within that chamber was acutely aware of this reality. The silence, elongated, spanning 10 seconds, then 20, and reaching 30. The cameras from C-SPAN recorded every fleeting instant. They captured every minute expression on her visage, the manner in which her gaze shifted nervously toward her attorney, the tightness with which her hands grasped the rim of the table, and the way her lips parted only to seal shut again without uttering a sound. 40 seconds elapsed, then 50, culminating in a full minute of silence. It stood as the most prolonged period of silence in the recorded history of congressional hearings. Furthermore, the impact was absolutely catastrophic. The hearing room was occupied to its maximum capacity. Every seat was taken. The press gallery was overflowing with journalists, and fellow members of Congress were forced to stand at the back of the room due to the lack of available seating. It had been universally understood that this hearing would carry significant weight. Speaker Johnson did not typically preside over hearings personally unless the matter was of grave importance. Yet, no observer had anticipated a scenario such as this. No one had foreseen the tranquil, systematic dismantling of a sitting congresswoman occurring in real time. Johnson occupied the seat at the head of the committee table, his hands resting calmly atop a substantial binder. Positioned behind him were display boards adorned with intricate charts, chronological timelines, and photographic evidence. To his right sat the committee's chief legal counsel and lead investigators. To leave additional members of the Ethics Committee, all of whom were Republicans, as the Democrats had chosen to boycott the proceedings. They had labeled the event a politically motivated attack. However, their vacant seats only served to lend the hearing a more solemn appearance, making it feel more judicial and less like political theater, resembling a criminal prosecution. Omar was dressed in a vibrant turquoise hijab, accompanied by a dark blazer. She had dressed with television in mind, expecting the creation of a viral video clip. She had harbored the belief that she would emerge as the protagonist of this narrative, the Muslim congresswoman defiantly resisting Republican persecution. She had weathered attacks far more severe, having been branded a terrorist, subjected to death threats, and accused of anti-Semitism. Following each prior incident, she had emerged with greater strength, increased defiance, and enhanced popularity among her base. Nevertheless, this situation was fundamentally different. This was not a matter of social media posts, speeches, or shouting matches on cable news programs. This concerns hard evidence, documentation, banking records, transcripts of telecommunications, and witness testimony. It was 6 months of investigative work distilled into a case that was legally airtight. Johnson eventually pierced the silence. His voice remains low, yet it projects clearly across the room. Permit me to rephrase the inquiry to render it even more elementary. You swore a solemn oath at the time you became a citizen. You renounced absolutely all allegiance to the nation of Somalia. You pledge allegiance exclusively to the United States. Was that oath sincere, or were you engaged in deception? Omar's attorney, David Brennan, a high-priced Washington, D.C. lawyer wearing a suit likely valued at $5,000, leaning in to whisper with urgency into her ear. She shook her head in a subtle motion and whispered a response. The microphones picked up the sound of murmurs, but failed to capture distinct words. Johnson waited with patience. He had the entire day at his disposal. He possessed all the necessary evidence. He could afford to wait. Eventually, Omar spoke. Her voice emerging sounds strained and defensive. That constitutes a loaded question that does not reflect reality. It is only classified as loaded if you lack the capacity to answer it with honesty. Johnson intervened. He did not do so rudely, but rather with factual accuracy. Every American citizen present in this room knows the answer instantaneously. We would desire for America to emerge victorious. Why are you unable to articulate that? More silence followed. Omar appeared trapped, backed into a corner. Johnson leaned forward in a slight motion. The reality that you cannot answer, that you refuse to answer, reveals everything we require to know. You are unable to say America because every person in this room has just testified 6 hours of evidence demonstrating that you have been operating in the interests of Somalia, coordinating with their government, accepting their funds, and voting exactly as they instructed you to vote. Contrary, you cannot say Somalia either, because that would constitute an admission that you lied during your citizenship oath and that you are serving in Congress under false pretenses. He paused. He allowed that statement to resonate. Therefore, you say nothing, which in itself constitutes an answer. Omar rose to her feet suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her voice trembled with rage. This proceeding is a witch hunt. This represents Islamophobia masquerading as legislative oversight. You are persecuting me because I am a black Muslim woman who possesses the courage to speak truth. 2. Power. Johnson's facial expression remained unaltered. Please resume your seat, Congresswoman. I refuse to sit down. His voice became sharp, cutting through the tension. This matter has absolutely no connection to your religion or your race. This is entirely about your actions, about documented proofs of foreign agent activity, about your refusal to register under FARA, about funds you received from foreign government sources, and about telephone calls, where you coordinate with foreign officials regarding how to undermine United States policy. Sit down. She resumed her seat because she had no alternative option. She sat because the sergeant-at-arms was positioned by the door. She sat because her attorney was tugging at her sleeve. Johnson retrieved a document from in his binder. Allow me to demonstrate to everyone what we have uncovered. This is a transcript of a telephone call, an NSA intercept from March of the current year. You are conversing with the Foreign Minister of Somalia, and you state, and I am reading your precise words, I will consistently prioritize the interests of Somalia. That is my primary loyalty. America is merely the location where I am employed. He looked up. He allowed that quotation to hang in the atmosphere. America is merely where I work. Not your nation, not your home, not the country to which you swore a sacred oath. Merely the place where you work, as if it were a job. As if you are a foreign agent who coincidentally possesses a congressional office and a security clearance. The room erupted into chaos. There were gasps, murmurs, people leaning forward, and members of the press typing with fury. Someone in the gallery shouted the word traitor before being given into silence. Johnson raised his voice incrementally. Over the course of the next hour, I intend to demonstrate to this committee and to the American populace exactly what Representative Omar has been engaged in for the past 4 years. identifying who has been funding her, who she has been coordinating with, what she has been articulating in private, versus what she states in public. And then we shall see if she is capable of answering that simple question. Where does your loyalty truly reside? He looked directly at Omar. However, I believe we already possess the answer. The voice of the narrator will later describe this specific moment. To understand how we arrived at this point, how the third highest-ranking Muslim in Congress found herself in a House hearing room, unable to articulate that she would want America to win a war, one must travel back 8 hours before. Back to when Ilhan Omar clicked this building, believing she would survive this ordeal just as she had survived everything else. Back to when she had no conception that Mike Johnson had constructed not a political attack, but a legal case. Back to when she still maintained the belief that she was untouchable. 8 hours prior, Representative Ilhan Omar sat in her suite in the Longworth office building, reviewing talking points with her attorney and chief of staff. It was shortly past 8, and the hearing was scheduled to commence at 10. She possessed 2 hours to prepare for what she assumed would be a routine session of political harassment. They possess nothing, Omar stated, scrolling through her phone to check Twitter reactions regarding the news of the hearing. Her supporters were already flooding the zone with hashtags defending her and tweets characterizing it as Islamophobia, adhering to the usual playbook. Mike Johnson has been investigating me for 6 months. If they possessed anything substantial, we would already be aware of it. This is merely red meat thrown to the MAGA base. David Brennan, her attorney, sat across from her, reviewing a thick folder containing anticipated questions and prepared responses. He had experienced dozens of these hearings and understood their mechanics. The subpoena is broad, covering FARA compliance, communications with foreign officials, and campaign finance disclosures. It is a standard fishing expedition. We will stonewall on anything sensitive. We will invoke privileges where applicable, and this matter will die in committee. The Democrats are boycotting, which signifies there is no quorum for formal action. This is purely theater. Her chief of staff, Marcus Osman, flipped through printed press releases that were ready for distribution, confirming the media strategy was set. The moment they attack you regarding Somalia, we will frame it as an attack on your advocacy for refugees and immigrants. If they raise the issue of money, all contributions were properly disclosed per FEC rules. If they question your foreign policy positions, we cite the First Amendment, asserting you have every right to criticize U.S. imperialism. Omar nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. She had endured worse adversaries than Mike Johnson. She had survived Trump calling her anti-American, survived McCarthy threatening to strip her of committee assignments, and survived countless death threats and protests. Each attack had rendered her stronger, made her base more devoted, and established her as a national figure in progressive politics. Remember, Brennan said, you are not obligated to answer most of their questions. If something feels like a trap, defer to me. I will invoke attorney-client privilege, or the Fifth Amendment if necessary. They cannot force you to incriminate yourself. I am not worried about incriminating myself, Omar stated. I have done nothing wrong. I have been aiding my constituents and standing up for what is right. They are attempting to criminalize normal congressional work. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that while she had been building her national profile and fighting public battles, Mike Johnson had been quietly constructing something very different. Not a political attack, but a prosecutorial case. 6 months of investigation, subpoenas, document requests, witness interviews, NSA intercepts, obtained through proper FISA warrants, and financial records traced through multiple banks and countries. Johnson had done what journalists do, build a case brick by brick until it was unassailable. 3 blocks away, in the Speaker's office in the Capitol, Mike Johnson sat at his desk, reviewing the final briefing book one last time. He was meticulous by nature, having been a constitutional lawyer before entering politics, teaching law, and arguing cases. He approached this hearing the way he would approach a trial. His chief counsel, Tom Emerson, a former assistant U.S. attorney who had prosecuted corruption cases, sat across from him. "We are ready. Everything is documented. Every claim is sourced. Every piece of evidence will hold up in federal court." Johnson flipped through the tabs in the binder: red for financial evidence, blue for communications intercepts, green for voting records, and yellow for witness statements. "Walk me through it one more time. I want to ensure the sequencing is correct." Emerson pulled out his own outline. "We establish what FARA is and why it exists. The Foreign Agents Registration Act requires anyone acting on behalf of a foreign government to register. It is not complicated. If you are lobbying for a foreign power, you register. That implies a word. Phase 1. The money. We demonstrate that her campaigns and affiliated PACs received approximately $1.3 million from sources with direct ties to the Somali government. Not properly disclosed, utilizing shell organizations and pass-through entities, representing a classic money laundering structure, constituting campaign finance violations at minimum and potential corruption. Johnson made a note. "We need to be careful here. Some of those donors are Somali Americans who are U.S. citizens. We are not accusing them. We are showing the money ultimately came from foreign sources." Exactly. We have traced the funding. The organizations that are donated are funded by Somali government-controlled entities. We possess the bank records. Emerson continued. Phase 2. The communications. The NSA has intercepted 43 calls or electronic communications between her and Somali government officials over the past 4 years. We cannot use all of them. Some are too classified, but we have a dozen that have been declassified specifically for this hearing. They show her coordinating with Somalia's government on pending legislation, sharing information from classified briefings, and promising to advocate for their positions. Phase 3. The voting record, simple and devastating. 23 votes in Congress related to Somalia or U.S.-Somalia relations. She voted against U.S. interests 23 times out of 23, 100% aligned with what Somalia's government wanted, and every vote came within 2 weeks of her communicating with Somali officials. The pattern demonstrates coordination. Johnson nodded. That is the key. Any one thing she can explain away, but the pattern is undeniable. Phase 4. The witnesses. We have 3 Somali American constituents from her district willing to testify. All are registered Democrats. All voted for her initially, and all are now willing to say publicly that she told them privately her loyalty is to Somalia first. One of them recorded her saying it. Johnson looked up sharply. The recording is clean and admissible. Single party, consent state. Minnesota allows recording with one party's knowledge. The Constitute recorded her own conversation with Omar. It is legal, and it is devastating. Omar's voice is heard saying, "You will always be Somali in your heart. That is where your loyalty should be." Phase 5. The question. After we have presented all this evidence, we ask her directly, which country would you want to win? It is a trap, but a fair one. If she says America, we play the intercept where she says her first loyalty is to Somalia. If she says Somalia, she has admitted she lied in her citizenship oath. If she refuses to answer, that is its own answer. Johnson sat back. What if she takes the 5th? Even better. Congresswoman refuses to state whether she would want America to win. That is the headline. That is the clip that plays forever. They reviewed potential defenses. Omar would claim Islamophobia. They had a response. This is about actions, not religion. We never mention her faith unless she brings it up. Omar would claim she was helping constituents with consular services. They had evidence showing it went far beyond that. Omar would say this was political persecution. They would let the evidence speak for itself. Johnson's communications director entered with the media plan. C-SPAN is carrying it live. Our rapid response team is ready to clip key moments immediately. We have 5 different legal scholars, 3 conservative and 2 liberal, ready to do interviews about FARA requirements and why they matter. We have the 3 Somali-American witnesses ready for media hits after they testified. This is not just a hearing, it is a narrative rollout. Johnson felt a twinge of something, not quite regret, but awareness. What he was about to do would end a congressional career, would possibly result in criminal prosecution, and would destroy someone's life. He thought about whether he was doing this for the right reasons. Then he thought about the evidence. The phone calls where she coordinated with a foreign government, the money from foreign sources, the votes that consistently harmed U.S. interests, and the security briefings she had participated and then shared information from. This wasn't political persecution. This was accountability for actions that would get anyone else arrested. Tone is everything, Johnson said. I am not attacking her personally. I am not questioning her faith or her background. I am presenting evidence of specific actions that violate federal law. Clinical, professional, prosecutorial. Let the facts speak. At 9:30 a.m., both sides moved toward the hearing room. Omar walked through the Capitol, surrounded by supporters, members of the Squad AOC. Rashida, Ayanna Pressley flanking her in solidarity. Cameras were everywhere. She stopped for a quick statement to the press. This hearing is a political witch hunt, designed to silence a black Muslim woman who speaks truth to power. But I will not be silenced. I will not be intimidated. And I will continue to fight for my constituents and for justice. She looked strong, defiant, ready for battle. Johnson entered through a side door, avoiding cameras, carrying his binder, looking like a lawyer heading to court. No performance, no press conference, just preparation. The hearing room filled quickly, every seat taken, press gallery packed. Gallery seats filled with Omar supporters wearing "We Stand," with Ilhan buttons mixed with critics holding signs about accountability and law. Capitol Police were everywhere, expecting disruption. At exactly 10 a.m., Johnson gave the hearing to order. The House Committee on Ethics will come to order. We are here today to investigate potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act and related federal laws by Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. His voice was formal and procedural. This wasn't political theater. This was official business. Congresswoman Omar, you have been subpoenaed to testify. You have the right to counsel, which I see you have exercised. You have the right to make an opening statement. You have the right to refuse to answer questions, though the committee may draw appropriate inferences from such refusal. Do you understand these rights? Omar nodded. I do. Would you like to make an opening statement? She stood. She had prepared for this moment, the speech that would go viral. The defiant stood against persecution. Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. She looked directly at the cameras. I want to start by saying this hearing is a disgrace. It is political persecution disguised as oversight. I am being targeted because I am a black Muslim woman who speaks truth to power. Because I criticize U.S. foreign policy. Because I stand with refugees and immigrants. Because I dare to ask why we spend billions on weapons instead of health care and education. She was hitting her stride now, voice strong. I came to this country as a refugee fleeing war. I lived in a camp. I came to America with nothing. I learned English. I became a citizen. I worked hard. I served my community. And I was elected to Congress to represent my constituents. Everything I have done, everything, has been in the service of my constituents, helping Somali Americans navigate immigration issues, advocating for policies that help refugees and displaced people, speaking out against U.S. interventions that destroy other countries. That is not being a foreign agent. That is being a representative. Her supporters in the gallery began applauding. Johnson let it go on for a few seconds, then gave them quiet. Order. We will have order, or I will clear the gallery. Omar continued. This committee has been investigating me for 6 months based on conspiracy theories promoted by right-wing media. They have twisted normal Congress work into something sinister. They have taken my advocacy for human rights and called it foreign influence. They have used my Muslim faith and my black identity against me. She looked directly at Johnson. I will not be silenced. I will not apologize for who I am or what I believe, and I will continue to fight for justice no matter how many years you hold. She sat down. Her supporters applauded again until Johnson gave them quiet with a warning. She looked confident, pleased with herself. She had delivered the speech, set the narrative. Now, it was just a matter of getting through the hearing with that narrative intact. Johnson let the moment settle, then opened his binder. Thank you for that statement, Congresswoman. Now, let's look at the evidence. And with those words, Omar's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. Johnson pulled out the first set of documents, slide copies to the committee members and to Omar's lawyer. Let's start with campaign finance. Congresswoman, your campaigns and affiliated PACs have raised approximately $8.7 million since you first ran for Congress in 2018. Does that sound accurate? Omar touched at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but that is approximately correct. Of that $8.7 million, approximately $3 million came from sources with direct ties to the Somali government or Somali government-controlled entities. Were you aware of that? Her lawyer starts to speak, but Omar cuts him off. All of my campaign contributions were properly vetted and disclosed according to FEC regulations. That wasn't my question, Johnson interrupted gently. Were you aware that significant portions of your funding came from Somali government-linked sources? Yes or no? Pause. I received donations from many sources, including Somali American community organizations. Let me be specific. Johnson pulled up a document on the screen behind him, large enough for everyone to see. The Somali American Leadership Council donated $380,000 to your campaigns across 3 election cycles. That's the single largest organizational donor to your campaigns. Correct? That's a legitimate American organization. It's incorporated in America. Yes. But let's talk about where its money comes from. Johnson clicked to the next slide. A flowchart showing money movement. The Somali American Leadership Council receives 87% of its funding from the Somali Commercial Bank. The bank is headquartered in Mogadishu. Its chairman is Abdi Hassan Mahdi, who is the brother of Somalia's finance minister. The bank is effectively controlled by individuals closely tied to Somalia's government. He let that sink in. So when the Somali American Leadership Council donates to your campaign, where is that money really coming from? Omar's lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Speaker, the organization is a registered 501c4 in the United States. My client followed all FEC disclosure requirements. Did she reveal that the organization was funded by a Somali government-controlled bank? Did she reveal the foreign source of the funds? Silence. Johnson pulled out more documents. Let me show you something else. This is from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. They track money laundering. They flagged the Somali American Leadership Council 2 years ago because of unusual money flows from Somalia. Large wire transfers from Mogadishu timed to coincide with U.S. election cycles. He showed the timeline. June 2020, $150,000 wired from Mogadishu to the council. 2 weeks later, $75,000 donated to your campaign. October 2022, $100,000 from Mogadishu. 3 weeks later, $100,000 to your campaign. The pattern repeats through 2022 and 2024. This isn't a grassroots American organization supporting your campaign. This is foreign money being laundered through a U.S. entity to fund your campaigns. Illegal, Omar tried to respond. I had no knowledge of the internal funding sources. You met with Abdi Hassan Mahdi 6 times during your first campaign. He hosted a fundraiser for you in Minneapolis, where he was the guest of honor. Multiple witnesses heard him introduce you as our voice in Congress and the representative for all Somalis here and in the homeland. You're telling me you didn't know he was connected to Somalia's government? No good answer. Johnson moved on. The Horn of Africa Development Association donated $220,000 across your campaigns, also funded mainly by Somali government sources. The East African Community Foundation donated $180,000. Same funding structure. The Mogadishu Business Alliance donated $140,000, funded by businesses owned by individuals with direct ties to Somalia's government. He showed a chart. All told, we've traced $1.3 million in campaign donations to foreign sources. That is 15% of everything you've raised, and you expect us to believe. You had no idea? Her lawyer objected. These are American organizations making legal donations. They're pass-throughs, shell organizations. The money originates in Somalia, gets laundered through U.S. entities, and ends up in her campaign. That is how foreign governments circumvent campaign finance law, and she knew it. Johnson pulled out another folder. Let's talk about your husband, Ahmed Hirsi. He runs a company called Sahan Services Group. According to your financial disclosures, that company has received $280,000 in consulting fees from various Somali businesses over the past 4 years. What services does his company provide? Omar's face tightened. My husband's business is separate from my congressional work. He works from your house. You file joint tax returns. His income is your income. So I'll ask again, what did his company do to earn $280,000 from businesses? In Somalia? Her lawyer whispered to her. She shook her head slightly. Johnson didn't wait. Let me tell you what our investigators found. Sahan Services Group has no website, no LinkedIn profile, no other clients we can identify besides these Somali businesses, no employees other than your husband. The consulting is undefined. No work product, no deliverables, no contracts specifying services. He showed bank records. But what we do have is a pattern. Every payment to his company came within 2 weeks of you voting on Somalia-related legislation. Every single payment. He displays a timeline, 2 columns, left side, payments to Sahan Services Group. Right side, your votes on Somalia-related bills. The correlation was perfect. Payment on March 15, 2022. Vote on Somalia sanctions on March 28, 2022. Payment on June 3, 2022. Vote on aid conditions on June 14, 2022. Over and over. This isn't consulting income. These are payments for your votes. This is corruption. The room erupted. Gasps, shouting from the gallery. Johnson gave up for order. We will have order, or I will clear this room. Omar stood up, her voice shaking. This is outrageous speculation based on coincidence. Sit down, Congresswoman. Johnson's voice was sharp. 8 payments, 8 votes, perfect timing. That is not a coincidence. That is evidence, and we're just getting started. Johnson opened a blue folder. Let's talk about your communications with Somali government officials. How many? Times? Would you estimate? You've spoken with members of Somalia's government since taking office in 2019? Omar looked wary now. I don't keep account. As part of my work helping constituents with immigration and consular issues, the FBI has a count. You've had documented contact with Somali government officials 127 times in the past 4 years. Phone calls, in-person meetings, encrypted messaging, 127 times. That's more contact than most State Department officials working on Somalia policy. He paused. Now, most problem of those communications are probably routine, helping a constituent with a visa issue, following up on a passport. That's normal congressional work. But 43 of those communications were different. 43 times you discussed U.S. policy towards Somalia, pending congressional votes, information from classified briefings, or strategic matters. And we have transcripts. Omar's lawyer sat up straighter. Mr. Speaker, I object. These transcripts were obtained legally under FISA warrants. The FBI was monitoring Somali government communications as part of ongoing terrorism investigations. Al-Shabaab, financing, weapons trafficking. Your client's name kept appearing in those communications, so the FBI obtained a warrant from the FISA court to monitor her communications with foreign government officials. Johnson pulled out a transcript. This is from March 14, 2025. You're speaking with Somalia's Foreign Minister, Abdullahi Hassan. You say, and I quote, "The sanctions bill is coming up for a vote next week. I've been talking with progressive members, Ocasio-Cortez, and a few others. We're working to either block it or at least strip the provisions targeting your officials. I think we can get about 15 votes. It's going to take some convincing, but I think we can do this." He looked up. You're coordinating with a foreign government on how to defeat U.S. legislation. That is not constituting services. That is lobbying for a foreign power. That is exactly what FARA is designed to prevent. Omar started to speak, but Johnson continued. Here's another one. April 2, 2025. You're speaking with Ambassador Omar Sharif, Somalia's ambassador to the United States. You said, I participated in a classified briefing yesterday on regional security and counterterrorism operations. I obviously can't share classified details, but I can tell you that the U.S. is planning to increase drone operations and special forces activities in the southern provinces over the next few months. Your government should prepare accordingly. You should start messaging about civilian casualties now, before the operations begin. The room went silent, completely silent. Johnson's voice got harder. You participated in a classified briefing. Then you called a foreign government official and told him about upcoming U.S. military operations. You gave them advanced warning so they could prepare. That is a violation of your security clearance. That is potential espionage. Americans could have died because of what you told. Omar's lawyer was on his feet. Mr. Speaker, this is highly prejudicial. It is her voice, her words, legally obtained. Would you like me to play the audio? He pressed a button. Omar's voice filled the room, crystal clear, saying exactly what Johnson had read. The audio quality was professional, NSA intercepted. Undeniable. Johnson turned off the audio. Let me share one more. This is my favorite. July 18th, 2025. You're speaking again with Foreign Minister Hassan. He's thanking you for your help on various matters. And you respond, I want everyone to hear this very carefully. You say, of course I will always prioritize Somalia's interests. That's my first loyalty. America is just where I work, where I have a platform. But my heart, my loyalty, that's with Somalia. That will never change. He let the quote hang in the air. Let everyone absorb it. America is just where I work. Not your country, not the nation you took an oath to serve. not the people you represent, just your workplace, just a platform. He looked directly at Omar. You're an elected representative of the United States Congress. You have a security clearance. You take classified briefings. You vote on legislation affecting national security, and you told a foreign official that your first loyalty is to his country, not to ours. Omar's face was flushed. Her hands gripped the table. That's taken completely out of context. Would you like me to play the full Instris conversation? It's 9 minutes long. It doesn't get better. You spend 9 minutes discussing how to coordinate your parliamentary advocacy with Somalia's government priorities. The context makes it worse, not better. Johnson pulled out a green folder. Let's examine your voting record on Somalia-related issues. In the past 4 years, there have been 23 bills, resolutions, or amendments that Congress voted on related to Somalia. Foreign aid conditions, sanctions, arms sales to regional partners, human rights resolutions. 23 votes where Congress took a position on U.S. Somalia policy. How did you vote on those 23 bills? Omar knew where this was going. I voted according to my conscience and my understanding of what's best for the region. You voted against U.S. interests all 23 times. 100%. Not 22 out of 23. Not 18 out of 23. All 23 times. Every single time, there was a choice between supporting U.S. policy or supporting Somalia's government position. You sided with Somalia. He displays the voting record on the screen. Each vote listed with her position. Bill to condition U.S. aid on human rights improvements in Somalia. You voted no. Resolution condemning Somalia's imprisonment of journalists. You voted present. Sanctions on Somali officials linked to corruption. You voted no. Arms sale to Kenya, which Somalia opposes because of border disputes. You voted no. Bill to increase funding for counterterrorism operations against al-Shabaab. You voted no. Resolution supporting democratic reforms in Somalia. You voted present. It works on and on. Johnson looked up from the screen. 23 votes. 23 times you sided with Somalia's government over the United States. That is not a policy disagreement. That is not progressive foreign policy. That is allegiance to a foreign power. Omar tried to defend herself. I have principled objections to U.S. militarism and intervention. Then why do you only have those objections when it comes to Somalia? You voted for military action in other contexts. You've supported aid to other countries without conditions. But when it comes to Somalia, 100% alignment with their government's position. He pulled out another chart. And here's what's really interesting. Every one of those 23 votes happened within 2 weeks of you communicating with Somali government officials. Every single one. The timeline shows it clearly. Call with Foreign Minister on March 10th. Vote on Somalia sanctions on March 22nd. Meeting with Ambassador on May 5th. Vote on aid conditions on May 16th. Perfect. Correlation. You talk to them. They tell you how they want you to vote. You vote that way. That is not representing your constituents. That is taking instructions from a foreign government. That is exactly what foreign agents do. Omar's lawyer stood. Mr. Speaker, you're drawing unwarranted conclusions from coincidental timing 23 times. That is not a coincidence. That is coordination. That is a pattern. So clear that any federal prosecutor would take it to a BACA jury. Johnson closed the folders in front of him. I want to shift now from documents to testimony. We have 3 witnesses who are constituting Congresswoman Omar. All Somalis, all U.S. citizens, all people who voted for her, and all Americans willing to testify about conversations they had with her, conversations about loyalty, about who she really served. He nodded to the door. I'd like to call our first witness. Amina Hassan, please come forward. A woman in her early 40s entered. She wore a hijab and a modest dress. She looked nervous but determined. She took her seat at the witness table, was sworn in, and gave her name for the record. Johnson spoke gently. Miss Hassan, thank you for being here. I know this is difficult. Please tell the committee about yourself. Amina speaks in clear but accented English. My name is Amina Hassan. I am a U.S. citizen. I came to America from Somalia in 1996 as a refugee. I was 16 years old. I have lived in Minneapolis ever since. I work as a nurse at Hennepin County Medical Center. I am married. I have 3 children who were all born in America. And you live in Congresswoman Omar's district? Yes, the 5th district. Did you vote for her? Yes, in 2018 and in 2020. I was very proud when she was elected. She was like us, a refugee who made it. I thought she would represent our community well. I thought she would help us integrate into American society, but help us succeed. Johnson nodded. What changed your mind about her? Amina took a breath. In 2020, there was a town hall meeting in Minneapolis, Cedar Riverside neighborhood. I participated because I wanted to ask about programs to help refugees integrate, English classes, job training, citizenship support, things to help us become American. What happened? I asked my question. I said that many refugees want to integrate, want to become fully American, but need support to do it. And she got angry. Amina's voice got stronger. She said, we shouldn't have to assimilate, that we should keep our Somali identity and culture, that America needs to change to accommodate us, not the other way around. What was your reaction? I was confused. I came to America because I wanted to be American. I love Somalia. It's where I was born, but I chose to become American. I took the law. I meant it. Johnson forward. Did you speak with Congresswoman Omar after the event? Yes. I waited until most people had left. I approached her casually. I told her that I didn't come to America to stay Somali. I came to become American. And she, Amina paused, emotional now. She looked at me like I was a trainer. She said, you can be American on paper, but you'll always be Somali in your heart. That's where your loyalty should be, to our people, to our homeland. Did anyone else hear this conversation? My husband was with me. He heard it too. And what did you think when she said that? Amina's voice cracked slightly. I thought she didn't understand what it means to be an American. Or maybe she understood and just didn't care. I came here as a refugee. I was given a chance at a new life. I love America. This is my home. Now. And she was telling me that wasn't good enough, that I should stay loyal to Somalia. Johnson pulled out his phone. Miss Hassan, do you have any documentation of this conversation? Yes. She pulled out her own phone. After that conversation, I became suspicious of her. So the next time I saw her at another event a few months later, I recorded our conversation. And what did she say in that conversation? Amina played the audio. Omar's voice is unmistakable. You have to understand, Amina. We are Somali first. That doesn't change just because we have American passports. Our loyalty, our identity, our purpose, that's all tied to Somalia, to our people back home. America is just where we live now, but Somalia is who we are. The hearing room erupted, shouted, gasped. Johnson gave up for order. Omar stood up. That recording was made without my knowledge. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, Johnson said. Miss Hassan was a party to the conversation. The recording is legal. He called 2 more witnesses, both Somali, both with similar stories, both describing Omar, telling them their true loyalty. Americans should be to Somalia, not America. One had a witness who corroborated the conversation. Another had written notes from immediately after their meeting with Omar, documenting what she'd said. All three witnesses were asked the same final question. Do you believe Representative Omar's first loyalty is to the United States or to Somalia? All three gave the same answer, to Somalia, without question. After the testimony finished, Johnson turned back to Omar. His voice was quiet now, serious. Congresswoman, let's talk about your oath of citizenship. You became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 2000. Do you remember the ceremony? Omar nodded shyly. Of course. Do you remember the oath you took? The standard citizenship oath? Let me read it to you. Make sure we all understand what you swore. Johnson pulled out a document. This is the oath every naturalized citizen takes. You took this oath in Minneapolis on October 5th, 2000. You raised your right hand, and you said, he read slowly, clearly, I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom, or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. He looked up. You swore to absolutely and entirely renounce all allegiance to Somalia. Did you mean that? Of course, I meant it. Then why did you tell the Somali foreign minister that your first loyalty is to Somalia? Why did you tell Constitute they'll always be Somali in their hearts? Why did you tell Amina Hassan that Somalia is who we are and America is just where we live? Those statements are the exact opposite of the oath you took. He continued reading the oath. I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. You swore to bear true faith and allegiance to the United States. Have you done that? I have. You've coordinated with a foreign government on how to defeat U.S. legislation. You've shared classified information with foreign officials. You've taken money from foreign government sources. You've voted against U.S. interests 100% of the time when they conflicted with Somalia's interests. That is not true faith and allegiance to the United States. That is the opposite. Johnson's voice got harder. The oath continues. Adin Pabla, I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. No mental reservation, no purpose of evasion. Did you take that oath freely, or did you have mental reservations? Did you think I'll say these words but I don't really mean them? Omar's lawyer objected. Mr. Speaker, you're asking her to speculate about her state of mind from 25 years ago. I'm asking if she lied, if she took an oath she never intended to keep, if she committed fraud to obtain U.S. citizenship. The room went silent because based on the evidence we've seen today, the money, the phone calls, the coordination, the votes, her own statements, it appears she never actually renounced her allegiance to Somalia. She never truly committed to serving only American interests. She took the oath, got the citizenship, ran for Congress, and has been serving Somalia's government the entire time. Johnson forward. That is fraud, Congresswoman. That is grounds for revoking your citizenship. That is grounds for prosecution. And it is grounds for removing you from Congress. The hearing had been going for nearly 7 hours. Omar looked exhausted, trapped. Every defense had been shredded. Every explanation has been countered with evidence. The money trail has been documented. The phone calls were recorded. The voting pattern was denied. The witnesses had testified under oath. Johnson had built a case that would hold up in any court. And now he was going to finish it. Congresswoman Omar, he said quietly, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to end where we began with a simple question. The most basic question of loyalty. He paused. Let the room settle. If the United States and Somalia went to war, hypothetically, which side would you want to win? The question hung in the air. Simple, direct, devastating. Omar stared at him, looked at her lawyer, looked at her hands. The silence stretched 10 seconds, 20, 30. She couldn't say America because everyone had just seen 7 hours of evidence showing she'd been working for Somalia. The phone transcripts, where she promised to prioritize Somalia's interests. The witnesses who testified, she told them Somalia was their true loyalty. The votes where she sided with Somalia over America every single time. But she couldn't say Somalia either because that would be admitted everything. Admitting she lied in her citizenship oath, admitting she was serving a foreign power, admitting treason on national television. So she said nothing. 40 seconds, 50, a full minute. Finally, she spoke. Her voice strained. That's an absurd hypothesis that doesn't reflect. It's not absurd, Johnson interrupted. It's the most basic question of loyalty. Every American knows the answer immediately. We'd want America to win, always, no matter what. Why can't you say that? Because it's a loaded question designed to. It's only loaded if you can't answer it honestly. Johnson's voice was calm but relentless. Let me make it even simpler. Do you believe your first loyalty is to the United States or to Somalia? Her lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. She shook her head, whispered back, I'm not going to engage with this racist line of questioning. It's not racist to ask where your loyalty lies, Johnson said sharply. It's not racist to expect a member of Congress to put America first. It's basic. It's fundamental. It's essential. And the fact that you're calling the question racist tells me you can't answer it. He stood now, looking down at her. You've been sitting here for 7 hours. You've heard the evidence, the money from foreign sources, the coordination with foreign officials, the votes against U.S. interests, the classified information you shared, your own words on tape saying your first loyalty is to Somalia. And now I'm asking you directly. Which country do you serve? Which country has your loyalty? And you can't answer, because everyone in this room knows the answer. Everyone watching at home knows the answer. You serve Somalia. Your loyalty is to Somalia. You've been a foreign agent operating inside Congress, with a security clearance and a vote on U.S. policy. Stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly. Her voice shook with anger and desperation. This entire hearing is a sham, a witch hunt. You've turned normal congressional work into some kind of spy thriller. You've persecuted me because I'm Muslim, because I'm black, because I dare to criticize U.S. imperialism. Johnson's expression didn't change. Sit down, Congresswoman. I will not sit down. You've twisted everything. The money was from legitimate American organizations. The calls were constituting services. The votes were my policy positions. You're criminalizing my religion and my identity. Sit down or I will have you removed from this hearing. You can't silence me. I represent. Johnson's voice cuts through like a whip. Sergeant at arms. If the Congresswoman does not sit down, escort her from this hearing. Omar's lawyer grabbed her arm, pulled her down into her seat. She was breathing hard, furious, but trapped. Johnson sat back down. Let the record reflect that Representative Omar refuses to answer whether her first loyalty is to the United States. She refused to answer whether she would want America to win in a conflict with Somalia. She deflects to claims of persecution and racism rather than addressing the evidence. He picked up a document. Based on the evidence presented in this hearing, this committee makes the following findings. 1. Representative Omar received approximately $1.3 million in campaign contributions from sources with direct ties to the Somali government. These sources were not officially disclosed. This constitutes campaign finance violations and potential money laundering. 2. Representative Omar communicates with Somali government officials 127 times over 4 years, including 43 communications, where she discussed U.S. policy, congressional votes, and classified information. She coordinates her congressional activities with a foreign government. This constitutes activity requiring registration under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. She did not register. That is wrong. 3. Representative Omar shared information derived from classified briefings with foreign officials. This constitutes a security clearance violation and potential espionage. 4. Representative Omar voted against U.S. interests 100% of the time when those interests conflicted with Somalia's government positions. The pattern and timing of these votes, combined with her communications with Somali officials, demonstrates coordination with a foreign power. 5. Representative Omar made statements to constituents and to foreign officials, indicating her primary loyalty is to Somalia rather than to the United States. This contradicts her citizenship oath and her congressional oath of tour office. Johnson looked up. Based on these findings, this committee will be making several referrals. First, to the Department of Justice for prosecution under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, campaign finance laws, and laws regarding classified information. Second, to the House Ethics Committee for violations of House rules regarding outside income, conflicts of interest, and conduct unbecoming a member of Congress. Third, to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for immediate revocation of Representative Omar's security clearance. Fourth, to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for investigation of potential fraud in her citizenship application. Fifth, to the House of Representatives for consideration of expulsion under Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution. Each referral landed like a hammer blow. Omar sat frozen, the color draining from her face. Representative Omar, you are hereby suspended from all committee assignments pending the outcome of these investigations. Your security clearance is revoked, effective immediately. You are prohibited from attending any classified briefings, and this committee recommends that the full House vote on your expulsion within 30 days. Omar found her voice. You can't do this. I just did. Johnson closed his binder. This hearing is adjourned. He stood. The other Republican committee members stood. They filed out. Omar sat at the witness table surrounded by her lawyer and staff, looking shell-shocked. The cameras captured every moment. Her supporters in the gallery were shouting, but it sounded distant. Defeated. She'd walked into this hearing thinking she could survive it, like she'd survived everything else, that she could play the victim, call it persecution, rally her base. But Johnson hadn't played politics. He'd prosecuted a case with evidence, with witnesses, with facts that couldn't be spun away. And now, her career was over. The video clips spread instantly. Within minutes of the hearing adjourning, the key moments were on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. The silence when she couldn't answer whether she'd want America to win. The recording of her saying, "America is just where I work." The witnesses testified she told them to stay loyal to Somalia. By evening, it was the only story, not just on conservative media, everywhere. CNN's legal analysis said the Farah case looked strong. MSNBC's panel was divided but somber. Even progressive outlets couldn't defend the recordings of her own voice. The New York Times, Omar hearing reveals troubling foreign ties. Washington Post, evidence of foreign coordination raises questions about Omar's loyalty. The Atlantic, when American citizenship isn't enough. Polling came quickly. 71% of Americans said members of Congress should unequivocally support America over other countries. 64% said Omar should resign. 58% supported investigating whether her citizenship was obtained fraudulently. Even in her district, approval dropped to 38%. Democratic leadership stayed silent for 48 hours, then released a tepid statement. These are serious allegations that must be thoroughly investigated through proper legal channels. Translation: she's on her own. Progressive squad members tried to defend her. AOC tweeted about Islamophobia. Tlaib called it a witch hunt, but the evidence was too strong. Even supporters couldn't explain away her own recorded voice saying her loyalty was to Somalia. 3 weeks later, the House voted on expulsion. It takes a two-thirds majority. The vote was 307 to 118.6. 2. Democrats joined all Republicans. Omar became only the sixth House member ever expelled. The Department of Justice indicted her on 3 counts of violating FARA, 2 counts of campaign finance fraud, and 1 count of mishandling classified information. Trial set for the following year. USCIS opened an investigation into her citizenship. If she lied in her oath, it could be revoked. She could be denaturalized and deported. Minnesota's governor announced a special election for her seat. 6 candidates immediately declared. None of them wanted her. Endorsement. The 3 Somali American testify who clearly became community leaders. They started an organization, Somali Americans for American Values. Their message, we came here to be American. We chose this country. Our loyalty is here. They held a press conference. Ilhan Omar doesn't represent us. She represents Somalia. We came to America to escape corruption and violence, to build new lives, to be American. She stole that. She betrayed us. 6 months after the Omar sat in a Minneapolis apartment awaiting hearing trial, her congressional career over, her citizenship in jeopardy, facing potential prison time, she gave one interview to a friendly outlet. I was persecuted for my identity, she said, for being Muslim, for being black, for daring to criticize U.S. foreign policy. But nobody was listening anymore because they'd all seen the evidence, heard the recordings, watched her unable to answer one simple question. Would you want America to win? The lesson was simple and brutal. You can be born somewhere else. You can immigrate. You can become a citizen. You can even serve in Congress. But the oath you take to renounce all other allegiances, to serve only America, that oath has to mean something. Ilhan Omar took that oath and she broke it. Not accidentally, not unknowingly, steadily, consistently for years. She coordinated with a foreign government, took their money, voted as they wanted, shared classified information, told constituted their loyalty should be to another country, said on tape that America was just where she worked. And when she was finally held accountable, when Mike Johnson spent 6 months building an airtight case and presented it methodically, professionally, without rhetoric or hyperbole, she had no defense except to call it persecution. But you can't claim persecution when they have recordings of your voice, bank records of the money, testify under oath, a voting record that speaks for itself. You can't claim Islamophobia when the question isn't about your religion, but about your actions. You can't claim racism when Americans of all backgrounds expect the same thing from their representatives, loyalty to America. Ilhan Omar failed that test, failed it repeatedly, failed it so thoroughly that she couldn't even say she'd want America to win a war. And that's why her career ended in a hearing room, with cameras rolling, with evidence stacked high, with one question she couldn't answer. Where does your loyalty lie? She never said, America, and that told everyone everything they needed to know.